This week on Jerusalem Dateline, CBN News talked with former New York mayor and current advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, about America's new relationship with Israel.
From my point of view, the relationship between the United States and Israel has now gone back to normal.
While the U.S. ponders moving its embassy to Jerusalem, Scott Ross takes a look at the city and its history. And Israel and the world remember the 6 million Jews who died in the Holocaust. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. In the first few days of the new U.S. administration, its relationship with Israel has changed dramatically in both style and substance. Just 2 days after his inauguration, President Trump invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Washington, and many expect the meeting will mark the beginning of a new era in U.S.-Israel relations. Trump invited Netanyahu to visit sometime in February during the first phone call between the two leaders. A statement from Washington said they had discussed ways to advance and strengthen the U.S.-Israel special relationship and security and stability in the Middle East. Netanyahu's office described the conversation as warm. The statements from both sides said they had discussed Iran. Absent from both statements was any mention of moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Trump said it's too early to talk about it, and White House spokesman Sean Spicer told journalists no decisions had yet been made.
We're at the beginning stages of this decision-making process, and his team's going to continue to consult with stakeholders as we get there.
Palestinians were upset by the possibility of the embassy move and warned Trump against it. But Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat said he applauded Trump and said it sent a clear message to the world that the U.S. recognizes Jerusalem as the indivisible capital of the State of Israel. The Israeli government breathed a sigh of relief following the inauguration. Now the waiting game continues to see how Trump will follow through on his pledges. One of the closest advisors to U.S. President Trump is former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani came to Israel to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and CBN News sat down with the former mayor to discuss the new U.S.-Israel relationship. We met in the Tel Aviv law offices of Greenberg Traurig, the only international law firm with an office in Israel, where Giuliani serves as its global chair of cybersecurity, privacy, and crisis management. Well, Mayor Giuliani, thanks for joining us on CBN News.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You met earlier today with the Prime Minister, and you gave a message, I believe, from President Trump. What kind of message?
Well, it was a message of friendship, and I've known the Prime Minister about the same amount of time as I know Mr. Trump, about 25 years, President Trump. They're both close friends of mine, and I just wanted to assure him that from my point of view, the relationship between the United States and Israel has now gone back to normal.
Yeah.
I thought the last 8 years it was abnormal that we had an American president that didn't support Israel in the way that I was used to, both Republican and Democratic presidents supporting Israel, and that he would now have a president that he could get along with, that shared essentially the same views on the world, and that when they did have disagreements, the disagreements would be in private, the way they should be between friends. That President Trump has a very high regard for him. I know that from my conversations with him. And then we discussed a few things that are private.
Okay. One of the other issues, Mayor, is, and maybe you've talked about with Prime Minister Netanyahu, is the pledge by President Trump to move the U.S. Embassy from here in Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. What concerns do you may have that, and how do you see that progressing from here?
Well, I believe that's something they'll talk about, and that's something that President Trump pledged to do, and I know he keeps his promises, so I can't tell you exactly how he's going to do it or when he's going to do it or in what stages, but I can tell you that he is very serious about the promises that he makes. A little bit different than some other politicians.
Do you see a ripple effect, possibly if the U.S. goes ahead with this move, that other nations, I've heard of it, possibly the Czech Republic, Australia, will do the same move to Jerusalem?
Well, I think so. Sure. Look, Jerusalem is the capital. I've been in favor of this for 20 years, so for me, it's not a new position. I think I was in favor of it before Congress even passed the law that the capital should be in Jerusalem. It just made sense to me. That is the capital of Israel. So I'd like to see it get done, but I realize there are repercussions from it, and it has to be done in the right way. And but I'm certain that President Trump will keep his word. And
as well with consultations with Israel to see how it should be done and when.
Absolutely. Just like you had to notice the stark difference with there were extra homes that were being built in a settlement with 2,500 extra homes in a settlement a couple of days ago. The reaction of the Obama administration, either from Hillary Clinton or John Kerry or Barack Obama, would have been condemnation of Israel, and instead the Trump administration's response was no comment, which means that's an Israeli issue. You've got to decide what you want to do with the settlements. It's your country, it's your security. We respect you, and if we have on the American side a disagreement, as friends, we should quietly discuss that, just the two of us, meaning the president and the prime minister, or the appropriate ministers, the foreign minister, secretary of state, or national security advisor. That's the way we used to do business, not this hostility that has been going on for the last 8 years.
Do you see that as a harbinger of a new relationship with the Trump administration in Israel?
I see it. I see it in two stages, and this is what I told. This is what I told the prime minister and other government officials that I met with. First, let's begin with the fact that we're back to our normal relationship, which is friendship. Second, I think it's going to be better than that, because I think President Trump has a very high regard for Israel. I think he sees Israel as a critical part of his effort to defeat radical Islamic terrorism. I think he sees Israel as a resource, not just an ally, but a resource. And I know he's surrounded by a group of advisors who have similar views. So I think we can make the friendship even stronger than it was. But we certainly are back to where we used to be. I remember telling Prime Minister Netanyahu some years ago, it must be very uncomfortable being the Prime Minister of Israel and not know whether the American president has your back. Of course, he didn't respond because he's too diplomatic to respond. Well, the American president now has his back, and vice versa.
Coming up, Scott Ross takes a tour of Jerusalem that continues to be in the center of history. Welcome back. U.S. President Trump has pledged to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, yet the Palestinian Authority wants the city as their future capital. CBN's Scott Ross took a tour of the city and uncovered the significance of Jerusalem that is becoming more and more the crossroads of history and prophecy.
Jerusalem's old city, the Temple Mount, and the Mount of Olives all share common bonds. In addition to biblical significance, they're all in the part of the city Palestinians want as their future capital.
Scripture says Jerusalem is a city set on a hill.
And we are standing on the hill, the Mount of Olives, and we are overlooking the Temple Mount. Beautiful vision here of the old city, and behind it the new city.
Chaim Silberstein, founder and president of Keep Jerusalem, believes the city must remain united. We spent a day looking at Jerusalem from different angles to understand its complexity.
This is a city that's ensconced in geopolitics, in divisiveness, both within the Jewish people and certainly the Arab nations against the Jewish people.
Jerusalem has been conquered more than any other city in history. Yet, it's been the only capital the Jewish people have ever known. Still, the world refuses to recognize it as Israel's capital, even though it's mentioned more than 640 times in the Old Testament and not once by name in the Quran.
Jerusalem is the capital of Israel.
We know that over 3,000 years ago, King David came here, he conquered Jerusalem, and he set up his capital here. And for 1,000 years, Israel had sovereignty, the Jews had sovereignty in the land of Israel. A pocket of Jews remained in in Palestine, in Israel, throughout the centuries. But we only saw a real return of the Jewish people in the last 150 years or so. And today, when we look at Jerusalem, we see Jerusalem built up.
At what point was it that the Arabs, the Palestinians, made a determination that this was their capital?
It was only when the Israelis liberated Jerusalem in '67 that they changed that, because they needed to get us out. So they then created this idea that they want a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital.
On the world stage, Jerusalem is typically divided between East and West. The newer Western city is primarily Jewish. The older Eastern section stretches from north to south. The majority of the city's Arabs live there, but so do an almost equal number of Jewish Israelis.
With the city as it is now and the talk of dividing Jerusalem, is that realistic? A divided Jerusalem?
I think that it would be a disaster of historic proportions and a huge mistake, because dividing up Jerusalem will create the exact opposite effect of peace.
From 1949 to 1967, Jerusalem was divided, with Jordan controlling the eastern sector. During 1967's Six-Day War, Israel took back control. Silverstein took me to the battlefield that turned the tide.
This is the actual spot where hand-to-hand combat took place here, is that correct?
Correct. This is probably the toughest battle in Jerusalem during the Six-Day War. Between the west and Mount Scopus was Ammunition Hill, so it was critical to take this hill.
The Bible calls Jerusalem the city of the great king, and it's seen many kings. In 1964, Jordan's King Hussein started building a hilltop palace on the northern edge of Jerusalem. The Six-Day War interrupted his plans.
This site where we are now is not really the palace of King Hussein, but rather the palace of King Saul.
From on high, it's easy to see why kings old and new would want to occupy this hill.
We're looking eastwards, and we're actually looking into the Judean desert. Behind the Judean desert are the mountains of Moab, which is where Jordan is today.
Oh.
So we can see all the way to the Dead Sea and the Jordan Valley. What we see below us is the Jewish neighborhood of Pisgat Ze'ev, and to the north of that, Neve Yaakov. These two neighborhoods are basically nestled within Arab neighborhoods that are surrounding them. If we would cut off Jerusalem and say everything to the left of this line would be Palestine, 90,000 Jews living in these two neighborhoods would find themselves in Palestine.
How can you divide them when they're so integrated?
That is a rhetorical question.
It is.
Yes.
Looking to the north, we could see biblical Judea and Samaria, otherwise known as the West Bank. In the distance, just 5 miles from Jerusalem, is Ramallah, the current seat of government for the Palestinian Authority.
An important thing to understand when you want to understand the strategic issues facing Jerusalem is, what is the goal of the Arabs? They understand that Jerusalem is the heart of the Jewish people, and if they can liberate Jerusalem from their point of view, then they will have succeeded in liberating Israel ultimately.
Silverstein believes the Arabs have three main ways they're working to liberate Jerusalem: by force, propaganda and diplomacy, and demography.
What they're doing is building and building and building inside Jerusalem, largely illegal structures. In fact, have successfully created a territorial continuum that runs from Ramallah in the north, all the way through Jerusalem, through the Old City, to Bethlehem in the south. And by doing that, they would have infiltrated a demographic Trojan horse inside Jerusalem.
Do you have hope for this city to eventually be whole? Do you see a good future ahead or no?
Zechariah chapter 14 talks about what's happening here on the Mount of Olives. There'll be an earthquake here, there'll be a war, there'll be all kinds of unnatural things that are happening here.
That's yet to happen.
That's yet to happen in the future. But Zechariah ends the prophecy by saying, and Jerusalem will dwell secure. The question is how we will get there. The thing that is guaranteed to bring peace to Jerusalem is keeping Jerusalem united under Israeli sovereignty. And that certainly is the prelude to hopefully the incredible event that we hope and pray will happen later, which will be ultimate peace both to Jerusalem and the world.
Up next, Israelis and the international community remember the Holocaust, and some see it as a wake-up call to the church. Welcome back. January 27th is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. To mark the day, many Jewish leaders and others are taking their picture with a sign saying, "We remember." It's a new way of commemorating the lives of 6 million Jews who lost their lives in the Holocaust. Many also remember the Holocaust through one of the most moving films of all time, Schindler's List. The movie shows how Oskar Schindler saved nearly 1,200 Jews during the Holocaust. And here in Jerusalem, Christian leaders recently met one of Schindler's survivors during a seminar at the World Holocaust Remembrance Center, Yad Vashem. At the end of Schindler's List, made in 1993, the survivors placed stones of remembrance on his grave in Jerusalem. Today, Eva Ratz is one of those survivors. As a young child in 1945, she was numbered 201 on Schindler's List. Her mother, Fela, was numbered 202.
They asked me in Poland, how did you survive the Holocaust? I say, first of all, the Almighty God. Second, my mother. And third, of course, Oskar Schindler.
Ratz addressed Christian leaders at the gravesite.
I loved Mr. Schindler, her director. All of us loved him. An angel of mercy, really. We knew exactly what he is doing and how difficult it is to do it.
Ratz later told the group about surviving the Holocaust and life in the camp before she met Schindler.
The Germans were terrible. 25 lashes on the behind was every day. They hang people in the Appelplatz every 2 days with no reason. I think that Hitler and the Nazism really convinced them that really, they are not human.
These Christian leaders came as part of a seminar hosted by Yad Vashem and the Museum of the Bible.
We think about the Holocaust, the church was silent. We don't have to be silent today.
Susanna Kokkonen leads the seminar for Christian leaders.
This seminar is for Christian leaders to learn about anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, and Israel today. When we think about anti-Semitism, we used to think about it in the past, but now in the past few years we have seen how much it's rising all over the world. So we understand that suddenly this topic is very urgent, and it's really important for church leaders to understand what's happening.
The 10-day seminar had a deep impact on the visiting Christian leaders.
I would say this seminar has been a life-changing experience. It has been a stretch spiritually, intellectually, emotionally. Has really impacted my view of the history of the Jewish people. To be here in the land, to meet the people, to meet the survivors, it's been quite a moving experience.
Pastor Josh Phillips plans to take home a new passion.
A love for Israel and the Jewish people that I didn't know I had, I didn't know I needed, but a desire to be a partner and an advocate for Israel, for the Jewish people.
Yet Kokkonen believes much of the church is still silent.
I see the silence of the church. We are silent about anti-Semitism, and that same conspiracy of silence also exists with regard to persecution of the Christians.
More Christians are being murdered every day than Jews. We need each other. There is a clash of civilizations.
Yad Vashem's Ephraim K. sees world events forging a bond between Jews and Christians.
We both have to work together because this is something that affects us all. And we have to know what the dangers are in fundamentalist, radical, extremist Islam. Evil cannot be overlooked, especially after the Holocaust.
Andy sees the value of these seminars.
When we come in contact with these evangelical pastors, it gives us hope. Israelis as Jews living here in the Middle East, we're in a tough neighborhood. It's not easy, but they give us a lot of support, a lot of optimism, which is important. And they embrace us and we embrace them. It couldn't be better.
Ratz agrees.
I want that everyone will know what Schindler was. Schindler was not a Jew. He was a Christian. And I'm sure that many Christians, maybe they will do the same. I believe in the Christians.
Coming up, see how one Jewish woman survived the Holocaust. Welcome back. Even though the Holocaust ended decades ago, many of the survivors still suffer from the past, and new challenges can also make life difficult. Hear how Christians and CBN's Operation Blessing helped one survivor during a crisis in her life.
Rita loves spending time with friends in her apartment in Or Akiva, Israel. Their company helps her cope with the traumatic memories she has of the Holocaust in Moldova.
The planes came and bombs started falling. It was so scary. Fire was everywhere.
Rita's parents quickly loaded her and her sister onto a horse-drawn cart, and they fled in the direction of Ukraine. They were stopped by Nazis who confiscated their belongings and forced them to walk all the way back to their village, which was soon turned into a ghetto.
I saw everything: public humiliation, violence, executions.
In the chaos of the final days of the war, a Christian neighbor was able to sneak Rita's family into their home, where they were hidden until the area was liberated.
They saved us out of the goodness of their hearts, and I will never forget that.
Years after surviving the horrors of the Holocaust, Rita moved from Moldova to Israel, but life hasn't been easy lately. Bad wiring in her old TV caused an electrical fire. Everything she owned was destroyed.
I was terrified, and I tried to get out as fast as I could, but I have trouble walking, and I thought I would burn up. I had no idea what I was going to do. I have no insurance and no money. Everything I had was lost.
So CBN Israel got Rita brand new appliances, including a stove, refrigerator, and washing machine. We also bought her new furniture and a more stable walker with a seat she can use when she needs to take a break. Now she has new friends who she invites over to enjoy her apartment.
I'm so thankful you were willing to help me. Emotionally, I was destroyed, but I have peace in my heart now. I wish you good health and pray you will continue to help others. What you do is so important.
That's a heartwarming story, and as Rita said, so very important for her to receive that kind of help. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you like Jerusalem Dateline, please share us on your social network. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.